I'm a solution engineer on the national government team based out of Washington, D.C. And I'm here today to talk to you about ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Online. So here are some of the topics we're going to cover today. We're going to do an introduction to Web GIS concepts. I'm going to talk about what is ArcGIS Online and what is ArcGIS Enterprise. Then I'll discuss similar capabilities between ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise, as well as addressing some of the differences. So let's start simply. What is Web GIS? Web GIS can be implemented in a software as a service pattern, for example, using ArcGIS Online, or on infrastructure you manage using ArcGIS Enterprise, or as a hybrid combination that allows you to leverage the best of both worlds. So you see here, it's a group of individuals connecting to information and data, all coming from one server architecture. And the server, or servers, is the powerhouse of Web GIS. So this is a traditional model of desktop GIS, where all your work is done on a local machine. You have access to your databases and your geodatabases all on your machine. And Web GIS is transforming how that work is done, making it easier and more efficient to share information and data across an entire enterprise. But just as a caveat, Web GIS is not a replacement for desktop GIS. It's a central tier in a modern GIS system. How we really see Web GIS is as the way to publish and share information to the ArcGIS Enterprise or ArcGIS Online for others to access. And here's how ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise fit into the overall ESRI platform. You see here, ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Desktop is where you're doing most of your desktop advanced analytical work. And then you share that information and content into ArcGIS Online and or ArcGIS Enterprise. And then use that data and information to create different ArcGIS applications for your users to access. And then finally, there's ArcGIS for developers. And that allows users to do custom development across the entire ESRI platform. There have been a series of webinars given and upcoming about ArcGIS for developers, and I'll share more information about those webinars at the end of my presentation if you're interested and want to learn more. So what is ArcGIS Enterprise? ArcGIS Enterprise is the foundational software system for GIS, powering mapping and visualization, analytics, data management. It is the backbone for running the ESRI suite of application and your own custom applications. ArcGIS Enterprise is integrated with ArcGIS Desktop, including ArcGIS Pro for mapping and authoring, and seamlessly sharing with ArcGIS Online to share content between systems. The biggest difference between ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Online is the fact that ArcGIS Enterprise gives you complete control over your deployment. It can be run on a single server machine or scaled across many machines in the cloud and on premises and in virtual environments. Now, ArcGIS Online is a cloud-based mapping and analysis solution. You can use it to make maps, analyze data, to share and collaborate. You can get access to workflow-specific apps, maps, and data from around the globe, and tools for being mobile in the field. Your data and maps are stored in a secure and private infrastructure and can be configured to meet your mapping and IT requirements. And this is software as a service. So ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise provide many capabilities that are easily accessible and interconnected. So some of the different applications that you might be familiar with, such as story maps, ArcGIS dashboards, web app builder, all of those application and content is available both in ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise. The main difference, as I mentioned earlier, is that ArcGIS Enterprise is on your own system, so you can control access and how that system is architected. Here are just some of the shared concepts that apply to both ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Online. You can publish and serve out web services. You can work with 3D data. You can access data from different sources. You can use web mapping and analyze data, as well as build and use applications. And then you can share and collaborate, as well as fueling field operations and making GIS content available to non-GIS users. So at this point, I'm going to give a demonstration of Web GIS. Okay. So this is an application created with Web App Builder for ArcGIS. With Web App Builder for ArcGIS, you can build powerful GIS apps that run on any device without writing a single line of code in both ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise portal. This specific app has several different functionalities that are all driven by different widgets. For example, users of this application can access information about the app. They can access and see a detailed legend about the information in the application. They can even run analysis on data layers within the application, as well as calculating directions. And I created this app all without writing a single line of code. And you're probably wondering, how did I create this app? Well, it all starts with a simple web map. A web map is a building block to WebGIS. It's an interactive display of geographic information that you can use to tell stories and answer questions. And the first place you want to start is with data. You have a variety of different ways to access different types of data. For example, you can search for data across your organization or including ArcGIS Online. You can browse living atlas layers. And even if you're using ArcGIS Enterprise portal, depending on how your system is architected, you can still living atlas layers within your ArcGIS Enterprise portal. You can bring in other services that have been web enabled. You can even upload a file from your desktop. Here, I'm uploading a CSV of different hospital locations in the Northern Virginia area. We can use the World Geocoding service to actually geocode the locations of the hospital on the map. This CSV doesn't contain any coordinates. Instead, it's going to use the addresses to put these points on a map. This will automatically bring up different smart mapping capabilities. Smart mapping analyzes your data and makes symbology recommendations based on that data. So if you see here, it's recommending that you symbolize the data based upon the name of the hospital. It's reading the list of attributes that are in this data table. However, for this example, we're going to stick with the location only. You have a variety of different options of symbology to work with. Access. Can change the size. And I'd like to point out here that you can actually bring in a custom image to create your own symbology. You also have access to a variety of ready-to-use base maps. If none of these base maps suit your need, you can actually create and use your own base map, or you can use the vector editing tools to edit existing vector-based maps. Now, once I've added this CSV, I actually want to save the layer to create a web service. Here, I want to give it a name. As well as add tags. Tags are really important because they help users actually find your content and your information if they have access to it. So this is going to take a minute to run. So while this is running, I can take a question if there are any so far.
Hey, Sarah, no questions so far. If anyone does have questions, please feel free to put them in the questions and answer widget, and we'll feed them to Sarah as the opportunity arises. Thanks.
Right, so now this has created a web layer that I can use not only in my map viewer, but I can use it across all of ArcGIS Online, or if I was in ArcGIS Enterprise portal, I could use it there as well. So one of the big things that you can also do is I can also search for and query locations within the map, such as putting in an address. So this will take you to the location that you search for in the map. It's using that same geocoding service that I mentioned earlier and when we geocoded the CSV. Now, just like in ArcGIS Desktop, you can edit feature layers within your web map. You have a couple different options of editing. You can add new points, for example, you can delete them. You can even update attributes. Now, if you're worried about people editing your data, you have complete control over how you can enable people to edit and use your data. You can have it set up so people can only view your data. They can't do any editing. You can track editing. You can even set up so that people can only add new features, or you can have it so they can only update existing attribute information. You control your data. So now that we have all the locations of the hospital, we want to learn a little bit more about the surrounding populations and the data. Oftentimes, just dots on a map aren't enough. So one of the big powerful capabilities is the ability to do web-based analysis. Both in ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise portal, you have an access to a variety of different analytical tools. These are some of the most popular geoprocessing tools that you might be familiar with from ArcGIS Desktop. They're broken up into different categories based upon the functionality of the tool. So in this example, we want to take a look at the population demographics surrounding the hospitals. So our first step is to actually calculate buffers, or in this example, drive times around our hospitals. So when you're working with analysis tools, you can actually click this little I button here to learn more information about the analytical tool to determine if this is a tool that you want to use to conduct your analysis. So for this example, we're going to calculate drive time around the different hospital locations. You can measure a variety of different information, such as the drive time, the driving distance, the walk time, etc. For this example, we're going to take a look at 20-minute drive time. You can even work with live traffic. There's a traffic service that you can use in ArcGIS Online. And you can determine the travel direction, so 20 minutes away from the facility, or in this case, we want to look at towards the facility. And we can give a name to the result. And here's where I want to point out something that you'll see a little bit differently if you're running this in ArcGIS Enterprise portal. This button here, Show Credits. Credits are the currency of ArcGIS Online. Anything you do in ArcGIS Online, from running analysis to storage, consumes credits. So before you run analysis in ArcGIS Online, it's a good idea to check to see how many credits you have, how many credits it will take to run this analysis. I'll talk more about credits later on in the presentation. Now we're going to run this. This will take about a minute to run, so I can take a question while this is running.
Great. One question we have is about data storage. Where is it stored or pulled in from another service?
That's a great question. So it really depends on the architecture of your system. If you're using ArcGIS Online, it's going to be stored in the ESRI cloud when you create that web service. Now, let's say you have access to an ArcGIS server that you're sharing and publishing data to. You can actually publish that data to that server. And then when I showed here, add a layer from the web, that way you can reference that web layer, so you don't have to redo your publishing of your data. If you're using ArcGIS Enterprise, that really is contingent on how your ArcGIS Enterprise is architect. But mainly if you publish what we call a hosted feature service, it's going to be published into what we call a hosting server, and that's where your data will reside, and you'll have access to the web service in your ArcGIS Enterprise portal. So where your data is really up to how your system is architected. You have more options using ArcGIS Enterprise than you do with ArcGIS Online. Okay, so this returned our drive time areas. So this is showing us the locations in Northern Virginia that are within 20 minutes of the different hospitals. Now, this gets us halfway to the problem that we want to solve. Now we want to actually understand the different population demographics that fall within this 20-minute drive time. We can actually run another analysis tool under the data enrichment section called Enrich Layer. What this Enrich Layer is letting us do is it's letting us take a look at different demographic variables that are available in ArcGIS Online. You can actually access these demographic information as well if you have a hybrid deployment of your ArcGIS Enterprise and are able to reach out to ArcGIS Online to pull in the data. There's a variety of different demographic variables that you can access to. But for this example, want to take a look at the most at-risk populations. So first thing we want to do is we want to capture the 2019 total populations. And then we can even access different generations of information. So if you see here, this breaks out the variable by different generations. And the most at-risk populations that we've seen as a trend is the baby boomer generation and the silent and British generations. So individuals born prior to 1965. So we can select all these variables, click apply, and then we want to give our layer a name. And then we want to run the analysis. And what this is going to do, it's going to calculate all those population variables that fall within that specific drive time. At this point, this is again going to take another about minute to run. Is there another question that I can answer?
Just a second as I look through some of the ones that have already been answered. One question that came up while you were doing the network analysis was, where did the network come from as you were calculating travel?
So that actually comes from an ArcGIS Online service that you have access to with using ArcGIS Online. And so that is what is being used to geocode the location of the hospitals, as well as calculating the drive time as well. You can actually access that very easily. It's inherent in ArcGIS Online. And if you develop a hybrid architecture of ArcGIS Enterprise, you can access that same layer in that same service to do the same work in your ArcGIS Enterprise. And I'll kind of point out how that actually is done later on in the presentation.
Great, and we have one more question.
Okay.
Is it correct that ArcGIS and ArcGIS Enterprise are compatible with ArcGIS Pro?
Yes, they are. So ArcGIS Pro is your desktop GIS. How we recommend is that's where you're going to do most of your heavy data analytics, data management, and data collection, for example. If you notice in my analysis tab here, there's only about, I can't remember the exact number, about 20 different analytical tools. And if you're familiar with ArcGIS Pro, there's a lot more geoprocessing tools that you have access to. And so what we did with ArcGIS Pro is we built it in so that it is 100% compatible with ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Pro. So you can sign into either your ArcGIS Enterprise or your ArcGIS Online within Pro, and you can publish data. So I created a web service right here in the web map, but I could actually pull that CSV into ArcGIS Pro and publish it to ArcGIS Online within ArcGIS Pro. So they're very compatible. You can bring in the different base maps as well as all the Living Atlas content directly into ArcGIS Pro as well. It's an interconnected platform that allows you to work in the best environment for the work that you are trying to do. Okay. So now that we have the drive time layer with all of our demographic information, as you see here, we can see the total population as well as the total population born prior to 1965. We can actually go ahead and remove just the straight drive time layer, because this is the layer we're going to focus on with the demographic information. And similar to how we did the symbology for the hospitals, we can come in and start changing how this information is symbolized. We can select from a list of attributes, or we can use ArcGIS Arcade to create custom visualizations. ArcGIS Arcade is a portable, lightweight, and secure expression language written for use in the ArcGIS platform. Like other expression languages, you can use it to perform mathematical calculations, manipulate text, and evaluate logical statements. So we can use it to do some simple calculations to change how we want to do our symbology. For example, let's symbolize this data based upon the percent of the population that is born prior to 1965. So how we want to do this is first we want to sum together the baby boomer population and the silent and greatest generation populations. So this will give us the total of the population born prior to 1965. And to get that percentage, we can then divide that by the total population. And if you see here, this is just a list of all the different fields that are available in my data layer that I'm using to do these calculations. And actually, to learn more about ArcGIS Arcade, one of my colleagues gave an ArcGIS Arcade webinar on Tuesday this week. The webinar has been recorded, and at the end of the presentation, I will share a link to where you can find the recording of that webinar and all the previous different webinars that we've hosted, as well as a schedule of the upcoming ones. Now, once we've written our expression, we want to test it to make sure it's a functional working expression. And then we can use that to add it to change our symbology. Hopefully you noticed our different drawing styles have changed, and that's due to the smart mapping. So the different styles that we have available are based upon the type of attribute or type that we're showing within our data. So a string or a text attribute field is going to have different drawing styles than a numeric one. So for example, this one, we can classify our data. We can come in and use a pre-created color ramp, as well as adjust the transparency of the layer. And now we have our layers symbolized based upon the percent of the population born prior to 1965. So let me give a little bit of an explanation. Let's take a look at the legend. So the area in dark blue, which is the area around Inova Fairfax Hospital, has the highest population born before 1965. Whereas the areas in white and light blue have lower percents of their total population. And I can actually access more information and that specifics by coming into what we call the pop-up. The pop-up exposes different information about the layers. So this is a list of all the different attributes that are in my attribute table. This can kind of be overwhelming and has some information exposed to it that we may not need to share or need access to. So we can actually come in and configure that pop-up to show the information that is most vital to the work that we are doing. So first things first, we can change the name of the pop-up. So what this is going to show is that each time I click one of the drive time locations, it'll bring up the name of the hospital associated with that drive time. We have a variety of different ways of displaying information in a pop-up. We can show just a list of the different attributes, as well as just a description from one field, or we can do a custom attribute display. So again, just like we did with the symbology, we can actually come in and use ArcGIS Arcade to configure our pop-up. So for example, let's calculate the total population born before 1965. If you recall, those are actually two different fields, so we don't have that exact number. So I come in, add my expression, and test it, and get the results. Now, we actually, to learn more information, want to add and calculate the percent of the population born prior to 1965 again. However, we're going to do a little bit different of a format. If you remember in the symbology, we just did a basic decimal base percentage. So as opposed to showing 25%, we did 0.25 to show the percentage. However, for this, since we're using this for the pop-up as opposed to the symbology, we want to do that nice times 100 to get that nice whole number percentage. And once we've added those expressions, we can come in and start configuring our custom attribute display. So I want to go over what I had just put in the custom attribute display. What this pop-up is going to show is that all of the text that isn't bold is going to be the same in each of our drive times when I click on them. However, the areas in bold in between the curly brackets, it's going to change based upon the buffer that we select. So it's going to show the name of hospital, the percent, a total population born prior to 1965, and then show the total percent of the population. Finally, we can add different types of media to the pop-up, including a column chart. So for this example, let's just add a quick column chart showing the population born prior to 1965, and we'll keep it broken out into the baby boomer populations and the silent and greatest generation populations. Now, once you've finished building out all of your pop-up information, you can click OK, and let's take a look at that pop-up. So this is telling us that within 20 minutes of Inova Fair Oaks Hospital, there is a population of just under 105,000 people born prior to 1965, which is almost 25% of the total population. We can see that Fairfax, almost 30% of the population was born prior to 1965. In Loudoun County, around Loudoun Hospital, only 20% of the population was born prior to 1965. So this is just a cleaner way of providing that information to the users and viewers of your web map. Now, once we finish creating the web map, we want to share it because obviously it's amazing work and we want to make sure that other people can access it and view it. Again, just like we did for the layer that we created, we want to add tags to make sure that people can search and discover it. Now we've saved our web map. So after we've saved our web map, we actually want to come in and share it. We don't necessarily have to share it right away with the public, our entire ArcGIS Online organization, or specific groups. We can actually come in and build out our web app prior to sharing it. So I want to go over some of the different web app capabilities that you see here. First of all, we have the configurable applications. ArcGIS configurable app templates allow you to build web apps from your web maps, your scenes, without having to write any code. Configurable apps differ from the web app builder. Configurable apps come with predetermined functionality that you configure with your data. As you see here, there's a variety of different apps to, for example, collect and edit data, interpret imagery, summarize data, as well as create a story map. Story maps are considered an ArcGIS configurable app. Whereas a web app builder, you drive the functionality of the app by selecting different widgets. So let's go ahead and get started creating a web app with Web App Builder. So this is going to bring us into the builder interface. The powerful capability about building an application with Web Builder is that you can interact with the application as you build it. This is highly beneficial. So as you're building the application, you can understand what the user experience is going to be when you finish with the application. So to begin with, Web App Builder provides a variety of different themes. Themes are what change how the app is laid out. So if you see the difference of how we have title information up here versus the location of the different widgets, those all change based upon the different themes that you select. You can even change the colors and the styles of the application, and as well as the specific widget layouts. We've already selected our map to use. We're going to use the map that just built in the previous example, but you can actually come in and change this map or edit it based upon what you want your final application to look like. Now the widgets. The widgets are where the actual functionality of the app comes through. All of the applications come with a variety of different app widgets already inherently built in the app, such as the zoom slider, the search, so you can search for addresses and places, the coordinates that you see down here at the bottom, as well as the home button to return to the home view. But here is where we can start to select different widgets that will drive the functionality of the app. If you remember from the previous example I showed at the beginning, there are several different widgets that I chose. For time's sake, I just want to show you how we can edit one widget. So here's a list of all the different widgets and functions that are built in inherently to Web App Builder. So for example, we did a basic analysis of very small demographic variables. So let's say as a hospital administrator, I want to understand even more about the different demographics surrounding my hospital. What I can come in and do is select the analysis widget and actually come in and select that enrich layer analysis tool again. And so what this allows the user to do is to come in and add other demographic variables to the analysis to start understanding more information about the demographics surrounding the hospital. You have different capabilities and different settings that you can set based upon the analysis tool that you select, including allow to export to results. And once you've selected that widget, I can actually come in here and interact with that widget while I'm still building the application. So I could come in here and completely rerun this analysis again. And that's where one of the biggest powerful capabilities of working with the Web App Builder is that you determine the functionality of the app and you can interact with it as you're building it. You can also come in and preview how the application will look on a variety of different devices, such as an iPhone, and even an iPad. So you can understand what your user's final experience is going to be. And once you've finished creating the application, you can go ahead and launch it and take a look at the apps. So in that time, I created an application in less than 5 minutes, and I didn't have to write a single line of code. And what's powerful about this is it's really easy to create a quick app to suit and build a specific purpose. And this app isn't static. This app is actually editable. I could come back into the builder and continue to configure and add more widgets as I see fit. So once you've built and shared an application, you're not tied to that app. You can come in and reconfigure it to suit your growing and potentially changing needs. So at this point, I want to take a look at some other applications that have been finished and shared. So this is an example of an ArcGIS story map. ArcGIS story maps bring together text, photos, and videos and other media together with different maps to create a narrative that informs and inspires. You can elevate your storytelling aesthetic with modern pre-designed templates that will put your content in a cohesive, easily understood, and polished story. Whatever your message is, whatever your audience is, everything you need to create remarkable map stories is here right within the story maps. It's your information and data all wrapped into an easily understood story. So this is a story map that shows the mapping experience of Mount Everest. I really wanted to show this story map because it is incredibly well done, but it also shows some very interesting features, such as the ability to input a 3D web scene directly within a story map. So you're not limited to just a 2D static map, a 2D dynamic map that we created in the example. You can bring in 3D information and scenes in your story maps. You bring together a variety of different texts and information, as well as different pictures to tell your story. And you can even bring in videos. This is actually an animation video created showing LiDAR model over Mount Everest Base Camp. So it's a pretty powerful capability to share and tell your story. Next, I want to show an example of ArcGIS Insights. ArcGIS Insights fuse location analytics with data science and business intelligent workflows. You can answer different questions you didn't know you needed to ask, analyze data completely, and unlock new insights. You can empower analysts of all different skill levels across your entire organization to directly connect with the data, perform advanced analysis, and take those results to your entire organization. This is an insights page showing the movement of narcotics throughout the world. What's powerful about ArcGIS Insights is the ability to bring in all of these different maps and charts and filter them based upon all the different information. So as you see here, if I select the different countries, it'll start to show in the map the different movements of the narcotics movements. And it's all interactive. So I can even come in and select a specific point and what country those points are associated with. Can even come down and see a link chart that shows the payee versus the sender as well. So you can start doing link analysis between different people. You can bring in multiple pages within one Insights page. And once you've done all this work to build out a very detailed Insights workbook, you can actually share this model. So when you've done all this work, you can share this model with your entire organization so they can replicate a similar workflow using their own data. Next, I want to show an example of ArcGIS Dashboard. ArcGIS Dashboard is a configurable web app that allows you to create informative dashboards that use charts, gauges, and other visual indicators to reflect the status of events, people, and assets in real time. If you see here, this is primarily showing one web map of different global activities. You can interact and engage with the web map, as well as filter the data based upon different times. And if you see, these charts are changing based upon the incidents that I select and the time filters that I put in place. The Johns Hopkins map that everyone has been showing has actually been a ArcGIS dashboard showing the development of the coronavirus in real time. And I want to point out that we are actually having a ArcGIS Dashboards and ArcGIS Insights webinar next week if you want to learn more information about those two products. That webinar, I would recommend tuning into that webinar, and I'll share that webinar information at the end of my presentation. At this point, I would like to take more questions as I switch back over to slides.
Yeah, we had one question on if you share data publicly, can anyone edit that data?
Nope. Nope. So that's one of the powerful capabilities of adding your data to ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. I'll actually come in and show you what that looks like. So here's the layer that I created in our web map. So when I come into the settings,
Sarah?
yes?
You're still showing your slides.
Okay. So how it works is in your, let me switch to back, change my share again. So what you'll see is when you have when you have a layer that you have editing turned on with the settings, you're able to change the different editing capabilities. So if you see here, this layer right here isn't enable editing. But if I was able to turn this on, this brings up a whole list of options that I have available to control how the data is edited. So some of the big ones are keeping track of who created and updated features, who created and updated last features, and you can enable sync if you're going to take this layer off the web. And then you can control the different types of editing. So for example, let's say you don't want anyone to add or delete any new features or delete existing features. You can turn those capabilities off. So people, for example, can only update the geometry, such as like moving a point to the correct location and changing the attributes. You can so you have a variety of different controls that you have when you enable your data to be edited. Now, let's say you want to do the full editing, but you only want yourself or specific people to do that. What you can do is when you create the layer and enable editing, you can either not share it, so you're the only person who has access to the layer and the only person who can edit it. Or if it's a specific group of people that you want to be able to edit it, you can create a group and invite all the users who need to be able to edit the layer have access to that group. So only specific people have access to the layer and only specific people can edit the layer. Okay. So now I want to talk about one of the big questions that we get. Do we need ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise? And the answer is sometimes it doesn't need to be one or the other. So where we start off with is in ArcGIS Online, it's the ESRI managed cloud-based infrastructure. It's starting off with the simple ArcGIS Enterprise. And as you develop your systems, you can build that out. So you can start bringing in the base maps and services from ArcGIS Online into your ArcGIS Enterprise, as well as different layers. So you can bring in other existing layers from ArcGIS Online into your ArcGIS Enterprise. That's what I referred to earlier as that hybrid approach. So you're able to bring things in and not necessarily push things out. So you have access to all of that content and information in ArcGIS Online, bring it in, work with it in your ArcGIS Enterprise on your own servers without having to open up your ArcGIS Enterprise to the public. I like to talk about ArcGIS Online as what's on the internet versus your ArcGIS Enterprise, which is on your intranet. So here are just some of the key differences between ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Online. So ArcGIS Enterprise is software. It's a software consisting of multiple components. It's released as we release different versions of our software. So when we update to 10.1, for example, a new version of ArcGIS Enterprise will be released with that. And that's something that needs to be upgraded manually. So you'll need to upgrade your ArcGIS system, ArcGIS Enterprise system, as the upgrades become available. And you can control your licensing structure and how it's deployed. Whereas ArcGIS Online is SaaS, or software as a service. So that's released 3 to 4 times a year. It's upgraded automatically by ESRI. One day you'll log in and ArcGIS Online might look completely different. They both have that core Web GIS functionality that I talked about. You can do the visualization, adding your own data, working with other data, the smart mapping tools, analysis tools, all of the different configurable apps, web app builder, etc., are all available in ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Online. So the demo that I showed you, you can replicate that both in ArcGIS Online and your ArcGIS Enterprise portal. And then the enterprise integration is in the security is a bit different and has more security functionality than ArcGIS Online. And then one of the big components is the real-time big data and imagery. Imagery is coming to ArcGIS Online, but currently right now you can only work with web-based imagery services in your ArcGIS Enterprise. And then with ArcGIS Online, that's where you get the provided content and services, such as the base maps, the living atlas, the geo-enrichment data, which is that demographic variables that I used in the analysis, as well as the routing service that is used to connect and do the drive time, as well as the geocoding. And both systems have the capabilities to do real-time and big data analysis. So at this point, to highlight some of the differences between ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise Portal, I want to take a look at how their pages are administered. I'm an admin on an ArcGIS Online organization, as well as an ArcGIS Enterprise Portal. So let's take a look first at the organization page of an ArcGIS Enterprise portal. Some of the similarities that you'll see in an ArcGIS Online administration is the ability to add and manage members, as well as controlling and manage add-on licensing. So you can actually license ArcGIS Pro and other applications such as Drone to Map, for example, all within both your ArcGIS Enterprise portal as well as your ArcGIS Online account. Where we'll really start to come in and see some of the differences is in the detailed settings, such as under the servers. Since ArcGIS Enterprise is built on your own systems, here is where you want to actually add and validate different servers to your portal. So these different servers are where, if you're working with this ArcGIS Enterprise portal, this is where your the different data is going to reside. So these are all registered with this ArcGIS Enterprise portal, and you can find all the data that you would find in the Enterprise portal directly from these servers. And with ArcGIS Online, you don't have this capability. You can use an ArcGIS server, but you can't register it directly with your ArcGIS Online. Another difference that you'll see here is this ArcGIS Online tab. So this is where you set up that hybrid approach that I discussed earlier in my presentation. So you can configure and use different utility services from ArcGIS Online. So the geo-enrichment service, that's the demographic information that we used in the enriched layers analysis. The geocoding service, for example, these are all the different services that we're pulling in from ArcGIS Online to use this ArcGIS Enterprise portal, as well as accessing the Living Atlas content here as well. And obviously you won't see this in your ArcGIS Online administration because you are using ArcGIS Online and this content and services already exist inherently within the system. And now, just to show you a bit of a difference, I want to show the organizational page of an ArcGIS Online organization. So hopefully right away, you'll see that there is a bit of a difference between the two administration pages. Here, you'll see the members and the ability to control the licensing here. But some of the biggest differences you'll see right away is all the subscription information that will discuss all the information about your ArcGIS Online organizational account, as well as credits. So credits, as I mentioned earlier, are the currency used across ArcGIS, and they're consumed for specific transactions, different types of storage, such as storing hosted feature layers, running analysis, and using some of the different premium content. And it's really important as an administrator of your ArcGIS Online organization that you're keeping an eye on how credits are being consumed. So within ArcGIS Online administration, you can see how the credit utilization is being broken down. For example, storage versus analytics. You see here, analytics actually typically consumes more credit than storage does. So you can see all these different numbers for different time periods that you select. And you can refresh and see those different dates as well. You can even see how your credit is being consumed by different content and how those content is being shared, as well as the applications and the members using credits. So you can see here that within this time period, I have used just under 29 credits. And so that is some of the biggest differences between ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise Portal. So at this point, I'd like to take any questions that we might have.
Great. One question that we had, and this was for ArcGIS Enterprise, is what's the difference between a federated and a registered server?
Basically, a registered server and a federated server, my understanding, are both the same thing. Basically, what you're saying is that your ArcGIS Enterprise can access content and services from those servers. And what that means is if I publish to a federated server, so if I'm an ArcGIS Pro and I publish to the federated server, that content will show up automatically in my ArcGIS Enterprise portal. I don't need to go in and do those steps to add the services to my ArcGIS Enterprise portal that I showed in the map viewer to add a web layer to my map.
Great, and then we have some questions around credits. The first question is, are credits for both ArcGIS Online and Enterprise? And then the second one is, who can see how many credits remain?
Okay, so only ArcGIS Online consumes credits, and that's basically because ESRI manages all the work and the architecture within the cloud, and so things that happen in the cloud. So for example, when you run analysis, that sometimes will spin up another computer to run that analysis, and that's why it costs credits to do that work. Since in ArcGIS Enterprise, you're using your own systems, whether that's actual hardware that you have in your organization, or if you're using your own cloud deployment, you don't have to worry about the credit consumption because you are using your own systems. And so you're responsible for making sure that you have the right amount of servers to do the right amount of work, for example. Now, where credits may come into play with ArcGIS Enterprise is if you're pulling in those those ArcGIS Online services, for example, to do different calculations. So for example, to have access to some of the premium content in the Living Atlas, that requires credits. So how that is managed is you don't manage that in your ArcGIS Enterprise, you actually manage that in your ArcGIS Online that is associated with your ArcGIS Enterprise. And then who can access the credits? Only the administrator can see how many credits are being consumed and who's using how many credits and how many credits you have left. So also, as an administrator of ArcGIS Online, you can actually control the number of credits that people have access to. So you're going to have different users doing different types of work in ArcGIS Online. And so what you can do is you can set a certain amount of credits that a person gets to make sure that your organization doesn't run out of credits, or someone who might not be familiar with how credits work, do not run and spin up a bunch of different analysis and drain your credits.
Great. And I think for the last question, where does Portal fit into these applications?
Okay, so Portal, or ArcGIS Enterprise Portal with a capital P, is part of ArcGIS Enterprise. So how I like to describe it, how I think it's most easily understood, is ArcGIS Enterprise is a tree, and ArcGIS Enterprise Portal is a branch off the tree. ArcGIS Enterprise Portal is your front-end user experience to access all of the different content and information that you have published to your ArcGIS Enterprise. So it will be that interface that most people work with. The vast majority of users of ArcGIS Enterprise will only be interacting with the ArcGIS Enterprise portal. That's going to be where you create your web map, your web applications, add data, do your symbology, for example, will all be in your ArcGIS Enterprise portal. ArcGIS Server, ArcGIS Data Store are all components of ArcGIS Enterprise that are supporting the front-end user experience. So for most of the people on the call, your primary interaction will be with the ArcGIS Enterprise portal. Okay. All right. Well, I just want to wrap up with the webinar schedule. So we have several upcoming webinars, such as a Python API Notebook Server webinar, and ArcGIS Insights and ArcGIS Dashboards webinars next week. And then in 2 weeks, we'll have an ArcGIS Pro SDK and an Imagery and ArcGIS webinar. And we've actually done 3 previous webinars, such as the ArcGIS API for JavaScript, ArcGIS Pro, and ArcGIS Arcade. You can find the recordings here. And don't worry, you don't need to type this out now. This webinar has been recorded, and we'll actually share the PowerPoints in a PDF after the end of the webinar, so you can find that information here. And I also wanted to share some learn lessons that you have access to for getting started with some of the concepts that I discussed. So ArcGIS Online has quite a few, such as the Getting Started with ArcGIS Online, Getting Started with ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World, and Integrating Maps, Apps, and Scenes to Tell a Story. I'd like to caveat that those three learn lessons are have you used an ArcGIS login? If you do not have one, you can sign up for a free ArcGIS Online account and complete those lessons. And I would also like to say that those workflows that you do in those lessons are typically very repeatable with ArcGIS Enterprise. Again, using the Living Atlas one will be really relevant if you're using an ArcGIS, if you have access to an ArcGIS Enterprise that has that hybrid deployment, so you can bring in the Living Atlas content into your ArcGIS Enterprise, but especially with the Get Started and the Integrating Your Maps, Apps, and Scenes to Tell a Story. Those two will be nearly identical workflows based upon the version of ArcGIS Enterprise that you have access to. And then there's also the Getting Started with ArcGIS Enterprise lessons. This asks and requires that you have a login to an ArcGIS Enterprise that you have available. And then we also have a path that you can find, and a path is a series of different learn lessons, and there's one about getting started with ArcGIS Enterprise for users. So barring any final questions, I hope this was valuable for everyone on the call, and I thank you very much for giving me your time.